Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of UP-CIFAL Philippines, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Into the Future, Who's Driving Industry 4.0 and Beyond. The webinar aims to examine how governance frameworks, cybersecurity strategies, and inclusive digital spaces and policies can support the responsible and ethical adoption of emerging technologies. It also seeks to explore practical approaches towards reducing digital inequalities and ensuring that the benefits of Industry 4.0 are accessible, safe, and inclusive for all. This webinar particularly highlights SDG 9, Industry Innovation and Infrastructure, SDG 10, Reduced Inequalities, SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, and of course, SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goals. My name is Gab Kabigting, a program officer from UP-CIFAL Philippines, and it is my pleasure to serve as your moderator for today's program. Before we begin, allow me to share a couple of house rules to follow to help ensure a smooth and productive session. First off, please keep your microphones muted throughout the webinar unless you are invited to speak. You may also submit your questions at any time through the Zoom Q&A box. We will address as many questions as time permits during the discussion period. We also encourage everyone to remain respectful and professional in all interactions. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded for documentation and educational purposes. Thank you so much for your cooperation. And without further ado, let us begin this program. To formally welcome all of our participants, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our opening speaker. Join me in welcoming Dr. Michelle R. Palumbarit, the Director of UP-CIFAL Philippines.
Thank you so much, Gab. A rainy but warm greetings from CIFAL Philippines. My sincere appreciation for your time and interest in this webinar. To Mr. Manantan, co-founder and senior advisor of Balay Labs, and Mr. Cabanlong, regional director for Southeast Asia Hub Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, or GFCE. Salamat po for your valuable time and your kind accommodation for our request as excellent speakers for today's session. To our participants, despite the unfavorable weather, your presence is highly valued. So this session, as Gab mentioned, examined the usefulness of digital governance and cybersecurity in our lives. And equally important, this webinar aims to identify strategies for their safe use as well. I hope that this event will inspire us to think of ways on how we can bridge the digital divide and promote access to technology for all, thus leaving no one behind. So I encourage you all to listen and participate actively in the discussions later. And I'm looking forward to the exciting talks and the wonderful discussions later. Thank you and maraming salamat po. Back to you, Gab.
Thank you so much, Dr. Palumbarit, for inspiring us and grounding today's event. Truly, we are prompted to think of ways to truly bridge the digital divide and provide more inclusive spaces for everyone, leaving no one behind. Of course, and with that, we will go to our first speaker for this afternoon. So our first speaker will be Dr. Mark Brian Manantan, co-founder and senior advisor of Balay Labs. Mark Manantan is a research fellow at La Trobe University Center for Global Security. His work sits at the intersection of emerging technologies, foreign and defense policy, strategic competition, and regional cooperation. He focuses particularly on the security, resilience, and governance of artificial intelligence, cyberspace, and critical supply chains across Asia and the Indo-Pacific. He is also affiliated with the center's Blue Security program. Alongside his role at La Trobe, Mark is a member of UNESCO's AI Experts Without Borders, a non resident fellow at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at the National Chengchi University in Taiwan, and a member of the Institutional Advisory Board of the Australian National University's Philippine Institute. In 2025, he served as a visiting fellow at Japan's National Institute for Defense Studies and under the Ministry of Defense in Tokyo. Once again, please help me welcome Dr. Mark Brian Manantan. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gab, and also to Michelle for the wonderful opening remarks. I know I'm in the Philippines when the introduction is always very, very generous. I really appreciate CIFAL Philippines and Unitar for the kind invitation for me to participate in today's webinar. Allow me to just share my screen. I prepared a couple of slides because I realized that 25 minutes, the slides would allow me to track the time for my presentation. So let me just get that out of the way. I hope everybody can see on my screen. Yeah, okay. So allow me to share the sort of findings and insights from my presentation comes from a report that we've published in May 2026. This is a work with Stimson Center in Washington, D.C., and looking into this topic of cyber accountability in Southeast Asia. This is a project that was funded by the Global Affairs Canada with their work in cybersecurity in Southeast Asia. The title of my presentation speaks about the implications of the study's findings in terms of the theme on governance, particularly in Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and other data-driven systems. So the study was conducted from 2024 up until late last year in 2025 and looks at five Southeast Asian countries who are following through with their commitments with regard to the UN framework on responsible state behavior. And what I'm going to do in the next couple of minutes is to provide you a high level sort of sharing of the findings of the report. I will be starting with, of course, setting the landscape because I understand that we have a wide variety of audience tuning in this afternoon's webinar, and so I think I will just like to offer some leveling off with regard to where the state of cybersecurity and cyber resilience is at the moment in Southeast Asia. Then I'll dive deep into what this term called cyber accountability. I'll provide definitions, but also sort of what do we consider as cyber accountability in cyberspace, particularly in the context of Southeast Asia, the five countries, in particular Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. And then from there, I'll move into how Southeast Asian countries observe the practice of cyber accountability from both a policy perspective and also in terms of practice. And then finally, I'll just end with a couple of implications in terms of the webinar's theme on governance, cybersecurity strategies, and Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. So right off the bat, I'd argue that there is an unprecedented growth in Southeast Asia when it comes to the digital economy, and the $300 billion figure that you see here is actually an estimation of the study conducted by Google, and I think in Temasek they conduct a yearly study on the digital economic growth of the region, and it is expected, or at least on track last year, that the region has reached $300 billion in gross merchandise value. This is also, of course, driven by rapid internet penetration with 200 million internet users, and the COVID-19 pandemic has been really an instrument in terms of the uptick of mobile users across the region, of course, with the rapid adoption of 5G technologies across Southeast Asia. And very interestingly, this year as well, if you've been following the news under the chairmanship of the Philippines, we are finalizing the Digital Economy Framework Agreement, or the ASEAN DEFA, which is the first in the world in terms of a digital economy agreement. And it is expected to conclude hopefully, I think around October or November, in time for the ASEAN summit there in Manila. But despite the glowing digital economic prospects and opportunities, there are gaps that we see across the region. There are growing concerns that legal institutional frameworks are not keeping up with the rapid digital boom. Cyber maturity is still uneven across ASEAN member states. You have very technologically advanced countries such as Singapore, and at the other end of the spectrum, you have countries such as Cambodia and Laos who are still in very much in the beginner stage in terms of their technological readiness, whether it's AI or cybersecurity. And I think very crucially here is that accountability remains to be a key challenge, and the role of states in following through in terms of their adherence to law, as well as the implementation of the cyber norms in their national context. And finally, given the growing geopolitical challenges across the region, we know, especially in the context of the Philippines with the South China Sea, that there are particular cyber powers across the region who are using cyber capabilities to conduct cyber espionage. And so, taking all of these factors all together, despite the worry, despite the gap, I think Industry 4.0 is really surging the attack surface. With what comes with rapid AI adoption and integration is also the risks that it poses to so many of the communities. And one of the key trends that we're observing over the past couple of years is the rise of cyber-enabled fraud, ransomware, as well as online scams, which have really become a macroeconomic problem. And the countries that I've mentioned earlier, which are the key case studies of the study, such as Cambodia, Laos, and unfortunately the Philippines and Thailand, have been really one of the key hotspots of these cyber-enabled fraud. Despite that, we see an expected number of data center investments coming across the region. We also see a year-on-year growth in cloud infrastructure because of that data center growth. And unfortunately, again, the rise of attempted ransomware attacks per day on regional business, not only by cyber criminals, but you also have cyber powers or cyber actors like North Korea. And the advent of artificial intelligence is surely an accelerant to this trend, and threat actors are capitalizing on the availability of artificial intelligence and creating deepfakes to create malware that are more difficult to detect, as well as in undermining or planting deliberate bias in large language models through indirect prompt injection. And we're also seeing a lot of cases where theft of AI models have become very rampant in replicating AI systems training data. In the Philippines, for sure, you're following the news more than me, but in March 2024, the House of Representatives have been really affected by the website has received 480 million access requests and was knocked offline for hours. In Vietnam, hacktivist operations have also been detected in terms of affecting critical national infrastructure. And as I've mentioned already, criminal groups are using generative AI to make scams more convincing and launch a more sophisticated scam campaigns, not just only in Southeast Asia, but across the Indo-Pacific. So if you look at the trends that I've just outlined, I think we should all be mindful that there are three forces shaping the governance agenda as we speak. And as I've already mentioned, and at the start of this presentation, rapid digitalization is definitely an accelerant, but also the increasing geopolitical tensions between the United States and China. Both superpowers are vying for technological supremacy, be it with the frontier AI models that US-based ICT companies have been promulgating, or through China's digital Silk Road in building some of Southeast Asia's key infrastructure from 5G, from undersea cables, as well as satellite or space capabilities. And finally, and the theme of this event is about Industry 4.0. And while we are still grappling with the issues and concerns and the uncertainties surrounding AI innovation, the prospects of quantum computing is already in the short horizon, and concerns about what they call the Q day has been really emerging a lot in discussions across the region, whether in academic or policy circles. And the question is if or should or how governments really are preparing and industry are preparing with these key trends that are about to reshape again the security and stability, both offline and online in Southeast Asia and the larger Indo-Pacific. So those trends, underlying those trends, we came up with the study on cyber accountability. So simply put, when we say cyber accountability, we look at two components of accountability. So it we look beyond the notion of who did what or pointing fingers, who conducted the cyber attack, or who are the companies that are what companies are being affected by cyber operations. And here represent two distinguishing dimensions of cyber accountability. The first is negative accountability, which of course a shorthand of saying the imposition of threats and raising cost of malicious behavior. And we often see this or manifest through cyber attribution or the imposition of sanctions. On the other hand, positive accountability looks at the incentives, policies, and instruments that encourage more productive behavior. And this comes in the form of capacity building, as well as confidence building measures. That the desire really is to build resilience and defense of critical national infrastructure. So very quickly, this is the baseline of what we mean by cyber accountability, or what are the key things we're looking for, examining, or assessing. If a state is considered cyber accountable, the baseline is the UN framework for responsible state behavior, comprising international law that applies to state conduct in cyberspace. You also have the 11 norms of that set clear expectations of how states should behave during peacetime. You also have cyber capacity building to harness the benefits and mitigate the risks of increased connectivity. And finally, confidence building measures are instruments that are deployed by state and non-state actors to mitigate miscalculation or prevent escalation in cyberspace. And so the baseline, the UN framework for responsible state behavior continues to evolve. International law, if I'm going to be more specific, looks at sort of the recommendation on how states consider international apply to their use of force, on how they raise issues or delineate sovereignty in cyberspace. On the 11 voluntary norms, these are non-binding norms of state behavior that covers a wide array of issue areas from critical national infrastructure to supply chain to human rights, as well as incident response teams in cooperation and cybercrime. When we look at confidence building measures, these are tools that are used to prevent or mitigate escalation of or misinterpretation of cyber activities that may spiral into actual conflict. So ASEAN really has one of the most important confidence building measures that was recognized by the UN Group of Government Experts in the UN Open-Ended Working Group, which is the establishment of the ASEAN Cyber Points of Contact Directory, which serves as key individuals or key institutions that ASEAN member states can come and communicate with in times of crisis. And finally, cyber capacity building, as I've mentioned early in this webinar, the uneven digital maturity across the region still affects how countries are cyber resilient in the face of increasing cyber attacks, whether from state or non-state actors. And so cyber capacity building are activities supported by governments such as the United States, Australia, Japan, South Korea, increasingly Singapore as well, to really bridge the legal, technical, and policy capacity across the region to follow through with the implementation of the UN framework for responsible state behavior. So if you look at the history of ASEAN, it has been really one of the key, I'd say, trailblazers when it comes to cyber accountability across the world. In 2018, ASEAN became the first organization to formally endorse the UN cyber norms. In 2020, ASEAN has established the Cybersecurity Coordinating Committee to really create a more integrated approach to cybersecurity across the three community pillars. And also in 2024, the discussion towards implementing cyber norms have moved towards region-specific norms implementation checklist. We've also seen the sort of establishment of the ASEAN CERT to enhance computer emergency response teams coordination during the Ninth Ministerial Conference. And in 2025, during Malaysia's chairmanship, the ASEAN Norms Implementation Checklist have moved to a regional action plan matrix that really looks into how countries or how ASEAN member states are following through with their commitments to the UN framework on responsible behavior. And interestingly, in 2025, Thailand became the second ASEAN member states next to Singapore in publishing their position on international law. In 2026, the focus has been more on the digital economic priorities and ambitions of the region. And finally, we are seeing as well the new iteration of the ASEAN Cyber Cooperation Strategy 2026-2030 that follows the previous 2021 to 2025. So just to share, these are the 11 norms, cyber norms on responsible state behavior. And the uptake, as of what we found in the research, is that the norms implementation so far has been uneven. So we've divided these norms into three categories. The first one are those norms who are widely embedded, particularly looking into the prevention of misusing ICTs, the protection of critical national infrastructure, and the interstate cooperation on cybercrime. And this is widely reflected in the national cybersecurity strategies, policies, and frameworks, and even local regulations, legislations adopted by ASEAN member states. What remains lagging are the norms on human rights and privacy, responding to requests for assistance, and reporting ICT vulnerabilities. The implementation of these norms have been really impacted by, in large, the social and economic considerations of countries, but more so, I would argue, the political will of leadership. There is an outstanding argument in the cybersecurity and technology policy literature that in Southeast Asia, ASEAN member states or the citizens are not just contending with the increasing cyber threats coming from malicious state actors externally to the state. And as we know, in some countries in the region, the state itself is the perpetrator of some of those cyber operations against their citizens, against their civil society groups that, of course, impinge on their human rights and privacy. Finally, what remains to be politically difficult is the call for increasing supply chain resilience, supply chain security, given the growing geopolitical contest between the US and China that impacts key industries such as semiconductor and critical minerals, given the prevailing low trust among stakeholders and the weaponization of trade that superpowers can use to coerce to achieve their strategic ends. In terms of the national positions in international law, only two ASEAN member states have published their position, particularly Singapore and Thailand. The publication of a national position in international law is very critical because cyber operations are opaque. While there is a strong argument to be made that attribution is possible, be it through legal means and technical, as well as through strategic or diplomatic, Southeast Asia is a region that thrives in terms of restraint, and the political and diplomatic and strategic culture in the region is far more complicated than those in the West, particularly the United States, even here in Australia, that have are more inclined to use naming and shaming to pinpoint a particular state actor who has been found to be conducting cyber espionage, be it for strategic reasons or economic or intellectual property theft. So in the region, publishing a national position in international law carries a lot of merit because it clarifies the legal expectations and also sets the red line for what a particular country sets an unacceptable behavior. And therefore, it signals what are the potential recourse that a country will undertake should those red lines be crossed by a malicious state actor or non-state actor. Still, while there is a growing interest among the remaining nine ASEAN member states on publishing a national position in international law, there remains so many barriers that each country has to overcome. And a key barrier to that is bureaucratic siloing. And this is not just unique to the Philippines. I think a lot of ASEAN member states have bureaucratic infighting amongst themselves in terms of who is the ministry who needs to lead the process. Is it the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Is it the Department of Information and cybersecurity? So it remains to be there remains to be a bureaucratic deadlock in terms of who will own the initiative of advancing a national position in international law. Some officials also read that publishing a national position in international law can undermine uh, their sovereignty, their longstanding sovereignty, and sort of non-interference norms. And that carries a perception risk that if one country, and this is something that we found in the research, that they feel that some officials feel that publishing a position in international law can be quite an allegiance to the Western multi-stakeholder model of internet governance. And again, if we look at the landscape in ASEAN, countries have different political, economic, and social contexts, and thus impacts their perception on the risks and the benefits of publishing a national position in international law. Finally, a huge aspect of cyber accountability, as I've mentioned, is attribution. It's the identifying who is responsible for the wrongful action. And I've already alluded to this in the previous slide that in Southeast Asia, the approach is very calibrated. It's very nuanced in a sense that the region doesn't necessarily, I mean, the region doesn't have, uh, undertakes attribution in a very pragmatic and calculated approach that factors the technical uh, details or evidence from the forensic investigation to identify the source of a cyber attack. Another factor that they weigh in as well when they conduct attribution is the political dimension, meaning what are the political consequences should a particular country make a cyber operations, make us an accusation against another country in terms of cyber operations that were found in their system to be operating. And finally, the legal dimension again points to the determination of responsibility under the ambit of international law. And during our research, we actually conducted a tabletop exercise. Given that attribution remains to be a very complex and at times a taboo topic in Southeast Asia, because of the relational and cultural factors that shapes the perception and the action of nation states to conduct attribution. In the tabletop exercise that we've conducted, we stress tested how countries such as the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand would use attribution should there be a major cyber attack that impacts the entire region. And what we found essentially is that most of the countries adhere to this three-tiering approach of using technical evidence to support legal assessment, weighed against strategic calculation or the political risks and consequences that they may face should they activate a more direct or naming and shaming type of attribution. And what we found out in the region is that it's never a black and white or a clear cut accountability attribution process, because most of the time, as I've mentioned already, relational and cultural aspects play into the attribution process, where most ASEAN member states would prefer to use backdoor diplomacy or quiet diplomacy to resolve the issue rather than standing in a podium and calling out a particular state actor in a press conference. And so the need for accountability is thus increasing in Southeast Asia, but the way or the method and the procedures involved in exercising accountability is far more nuanced than what we see in the West that takes comfort in using naming and shaming as an approach. And so, what we found out based on the outcomes of the tabletop exercise is that a calibrated attribution is emerging in the region. And we are already seeing this in practice in real time. For example, Malaysia's MyCert will conduct attribution of have conducted an attribution in 2020, identifying APT-40, an advanced persistent threat actor, targeting their officials. But it was never attributed by a diplomatic or political through diplomatic or political channels. It's mostly through the use of technical bulletins that were published by Malaysia's MICERT. Singapore last year in July 2025 has named UN C3886, another advanced persistent threat actor targeting key critical national infrastructures. But Singapore was have maintained ambiguity and exercised restraint on really directly identifying the malicious state actor. And therefore, this goes to this notion that views and attribution in the region are deeply cultural, rooted in the emphasis on restraint and harmony, and shaped, of course, by dense economic interdependence. Despite the calibrated attribution not really fitting in within the conventional notion of attribution, it works. What we found out is that balancing attribution is takes into consideration all of the factors involved: technical cooperation, diplomatic back channeling, as well as more of a region-wide practice of how moving forward ASEAN will conduct attribution as part or being in the center of the geopolitical challenges that most countries face, but also how a particular country from its own national interest or national perspective can balance conducting attribution vis-a-vis its broader foreign policy priorities with suspected malicious actors. Most networks and systems are operated, of course, by third parties, and attribution is not only a responsibility of the state. The private sector has a huge stake, given that majority of these ICT or critical national infrastructure rests in the hands of the private sector. The role of academia and civil society is also very important, given that human rights and privacy remains to be one of the most underrated cyber norms, and states are having a hard time or difficulty in following through with their commitments. So I'm just ending with a couple of two more slides here. So where do we see next in terms of cyber accountability across the region? I think there is comfort knowing that majority of the ASEAN member states are now exploring the publication of a national position international law, including the Philippines. Given the implications of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing, capacity building remains to be a key priority for most ASEAN member states across the region. The fast tracking of the ASEAN CERT, of course, to formalize or at least organize a more means of formal attribution mechanisms and regional information sharing, particularly in crises and non-crisis situations. And finally, I think I'll just end with this slide with the theme of driving Industry 4.0, reflecting on the findings and insights from the Fostering Cyber Accountability in Southeast Asia report. I would offer three implications for Industry 4.0. The reality is that technology is really outpacing the frameworks that meant to govern it, and that governments may be inclined or are more inclined to create more laws. For example, in the Philippines, I know there are pending AI laws in Congress, but I think we should resist the temptation that there are already existing frameworks that exist that can be used and in to govern artificial intelligence. And another law, another framework may not be the solution to what we're trying to solve, given that technological disruption does outpace regulations. Accountability is also not a punishment in a region built on restraint. As AI technologies get adopted and integrated in cyber capabilities, cyber operations, of course, will increase dramatically. And so that would call for more efforts to increase capacity, confidence building measures, and calibrated practice. And finally, inclusion is a security question. The theme that was mentioned is that we don't leave anyone behind. And what we're seeing now across the region is that the rise of non-state actors such as scammers is really the outgrowth of increasing poverty and the increasing discontent with political and economic institutions that causes social disconnection among marginalized communities that may be tempted to use these tools to conduct malicious activities and behavior. So I think I'll just stop here for now, and then I hope that those you found my presentation informative and insightful, and I look forward to the questions during the Q&A. Thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manandan, for that quite very and insightful presentation. I think what I found quite interesting was about cyber accountability, and I think this is really relevant for us here in Asia and in the Philippines as AI, IoT, and data-driven systems become more embedded in government, business, and everyday life. Cyber accountability cannot only be about identifying and punishing bad actors after something goes wrong. It also has to be about building the capacity of institutions, companies, and communities to prevent harm in the first place. In regions like the Southeast Asia, where countries have very different levels of digital capacity and regulatory development, positive accountability becomes particularly important. Strengthening cybersecurity standards, investing in skills and infrastructure, and encouraging cooperation between government, industry, and civil society can help ensure our digital transformation under Industry 4.0 is not only innovative, but also secure, trustworthy, and resilient so that no one is left behind. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Manantan. So if you have any questions for Dr. Manantan, you may input them in the Zoom Q&A box and we will discuss as many as we can later on in the Q&A portion. So with that, we now move on to our second speaker for this afternoon, Mr. Alan Cabanlong, the Regional Director for Southeast Asia Hub for Global Forum on Cyber Expertise. Alan is an esteemed professional with a career spanning 2 decades, rooted deeply in the realm of cybersecurity. Known as a trailblazer in Philippine cybersecurity development, Alan has achieved multiple landmark accomplishments. He authored the pioneering National Cybersecurity Strategy, designed and implemented the first national cybersecurity management systems platform, and organized the Philippine National Computer Emergency Response Team. His pivotal role in the passage of the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012 significantly contributed to the Philippines' accession to the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime in 2018. Alan's robust academic background complements his practical experience. He is an ASEAN engineer, a professional electronics engineer, and holds a Master of Science from the Waseda University in Tokyo. Please help me welcome Mr. Alan Cabanlong. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gab. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. To our colleagues from UP-CIFAL Philippines and UNITAR, uh, fellow speakers, Brian, nice to see you again. Distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to join you today. Our theme asks deceptively simple question, into the future, who's driving 4.0 and beyond? So, when we hear about Industry 4.0, we immediately think about AI, automation, robotics, cloud computing, IoT, big data, ano pa ba? Autonomous systems, and increasingly intelligent machines. And when we talk about the future, our attention naturally gravitates towards the technology. What will AI be able to do next? Which jobs will be automated? Or how intelligent will machines become? Then how industries will change? But I would like to begin by suggesting that perhaps we are asking the wrong first question. I think the most important question is not what will technology be capable of doing. To my mind, the more important question is, what do we want technology to do for society? And who will be responsible for ensuring that it gets us there? Because technology may provide the engine of Industry 4.0, but governance must hold the steering wheel. And in cybersecurity, we must make sure that the vehicle remains safe, resilient, and trustworthy throughout the journey. So the first thing we need to recognize is that Industry 4.0 has already moved far beyond the factory floor. The original idea was focused heavily on smart manufacturing, connecting machines, sensors, production systems, data and automation. This is the original idea of Industry 4.0. But today, the same transformation is occurring everywhere. We have smart cities now, we have digital banking, we have almost digital government, no? AI-assisted healthcare, for example, more logistics, which is already automated. Our transportation are now connected. No, we have businesses using cloud computing. We have the digital ID already, right? Some in places we have smart energy grids, and increasingly AI supported government decision making. So Industry 4.0 is no longer simply an industrial transformation. No, it is now becoming a societal transformation. And this changes the nature of the conversation. Because when technology becomes deeply embedded in society, technological failure is no longer simply an IT problem. No? A compromised email is one thing, a compromised hospital is different, a compromised manufacturing plant is different, a compromised banking system, power grid, telecoms, network, airport, water system, government platform, and etc., can have consequences extending far beyond cyberspace. So now the distinction between the digital world and the physical world is becoming increasingly blurred. That is why cybersecurity must evolve together with digital transformation. There's a principle that I have consistently emphasized throughout my work in cybersecurity. Actually, this is part of my dissertation in UP and CIFAL. Now, even digital transformation creates a corresponding cybersecurity obligation. So when we digitize something, of course, we create efficiency, but we also create dependency. When we connect something, we create accessibility, but we also create an attack surface. When we automate something, we create productivity, but we may also create systemic risk. And when we concentrate enormous amounts of data into digital platforms, we create economic value, right? But also very attractive targets for cyber criminals and other threat actors, right? So this does not mean we should be afraid of technology. It's quite the opposite, actually. No, it means we must become an enabler of digital transformation rather than an afterthought to it. Too often, organizations still approach cybersecurity this way. Una-una, they design the system, and then i-deploy nila yung technology, pagkatapos i-connect nila everything, right? And finally, ask the cybersecurity team, can you secure this? So by that point, many of the risks have already been designed into the architecture. So Industry 4.0 requires a different approach. One, security by design, privacy by design, resilience by design. And increasingly, I would add trust by design. Cybersecurity should not be viewed as the brakes that slow down digital transformation. Hindi dapat eh. Because cybersecurity should be part of that steering system that allows us to move faster with confidence, right? But even cybersecurity itself must evolve. For many years, our cybersecurity strategies were dominated by prevention, building stronger firewalls, installing antivirus, protection of the perimeter, so that the attackers will be kept outside. All of those remain important, of course. Yeah. But the modern digital environment requires us to accept an uncomfortable reality. Ano yun? No organization can guarantee that it will never be compromised. Therefore, the question there is no longer simply how do we prevent attacks. It is also how do we continue operating when attack succeeds. So that is a shift from cybersecurity toward cyber resilience. A resilient organization assumes that incidents can occur. It develops the capability to detect them quickly, tapos kinocontain yan, tapos it respond effectively, and then recover, no? So that essential services can run again, learn from the incident, and emerge stronger. So this becomes especially important under Industry 4.0 because our digital dependencies are becoming interconnected. A vulnerability in UP-CIFAL can affect another system in UP. A compromised supplier can affect hundreds of customers. A cloud service interruption can affect multiple industries, right? So a vulnerability in widely deployed software can suddenly become a global security problem. Look at what happened last time, no? When CrowdStrike went down. So resilience is no longer simply organizational. It is increasingly ecosystem-wide. Then came AI. So meron na tayong AI ngayon. AI changes this discussion significantly. Because AI is not simply another technology that we connect to our systems. AI becomes a decision-making layer within those systems. No? AI can identify cyber threats, detect fraud, optimize manufacturing, analyze medical information, manage traffic, improve logistics, personalize education, support government services, ano pa ba? Automate admin processes, and dramatically increase productivity. So those opportunities are very, very, enormous. But the governance questions are equally significant. When AI systems recommends a decision or eventually makes one, we need to ask, who is accountable? What data was used? Tama ba yung data? Wala bang bias? No? Can the decision be explained? Can a human challenge it? Can someone manipulate the model? Ito yung mga tanong eh. No? Can the system be compromised, for example? What happens when the AI is confidently wrong? And perhaps most importantly, who bears responsibility when an automated decision causes harm? These are not, technical questions. No? These are questions of governance, law, ethics, cybersecurity, and public accountability. That is why I believe the correct approach to AI is neither unrestricted deployment nor regulation that prevents innovation. We need risk-based and adaptive governance. Ano ibig sabihin? The risk, we define the accountability, we protect the people, and of course, maintain human oversight when consequences are significant, but leave sufficient room for innovation. Because if our regulations are written around today's technology, there's a very good chance that technology will have changed by the time those regulations are fully implemented. Ganun ang nangyari sa atin no? Sa mga batas natin normally. We create laws or binabox natin sila. But we should create an adaptive policies, an adaptive law, no, that would be there, in 10 years time. So there's another question, no? Will AI replace us? Well, whenever we discuss AI, one question, yun, lagi, will AI replace us? Will AI replace people? No? There will, certainly be disruption. Some functions will disappear, others will change significantly, and entirely new professions will emerge. Kasi yung ibang profession mawawala na yan, no? Because of AI. Trend Micro has uh, laid off hundreds of people, no? Because of AI. But I think there's another more immediate challenge. In many professions, the competition may not simply be human versus AI. It may increasingly become people know how to use AI versus people who do not. No, that distinction is important because it means workforce development cannot simply focus on protecting existing jobs. We need to prepare people to operate effectively in a technology-rich environment. And that requires more than technical skills. We need AI literacy, for example, cybersecurity awareness, data literacy, critical thinking, problem solving, so on and so forth, no? And the ability to exercise judgment when machine provide recommendations. Because the future workforce should not simply know how to operate technology. It must know when to trust technology and when not to. Okay. This brings me, to what I consider one of the most important principles of Industry 4.0. Technology must remain human-centered. We should never confuse technological sophistication with societal progress. The Philippines can deploy, for example, thousands of digital services and still leave millions of people behind. Huh? Tama ba? A government can automate services, but make them inaccessible to citizens without digital literacy. A company can deploy AI to improve efficiency, but undermine trust if employees and customers do not understand how decisions are being made. Technology can reduce inequality, yes, but technology can also amplify it. Consider a citizen who technically has internet connectivity. Tayo, di ba? Meron tayong connection. Yan. Does that automatically mean that person is digitally included? Tama ba? To my mind, it's not necessarily. Can they afford reliable connectivity? Do they own an appropriate device? Meron ba silang skills? No? The necessary digital skills that they need. Can they recognize scams? Do they understand how their personal data is being used? Safe ba sila when they access digital financial services like GCash or Paymaya or even the banking, no? Payment system? Alam ba nila when something goes wrong? This is why I believe digital inclusion has at least four dimensions: access, affordability, capability, and safety. If one of those is missing, inclusion remains incomplete, and digital society cannot genuinely be inclusive if citizens cannot safely participate in it. So, what is the challenge for us, Philippines, as you know, or for any other developing economies? Industry 4.0 presents developing economies with an extraordinary opportunity. We can leapfrog legacy infrastructure, right? Because we can already learn from other countries did, right? We can deploy cloud technologies without building massive traditional data centers. We can expand financial inclusion through digital platforms. We can improve government services. We can use AI to overcome shortages in specialized expertise. We can even give small businesses access to tools that previously belonged to large corporations. But there is also a danger. Technology can be acquired much faster than institutional capacity can be developed. A government can purchase sophisticated technology in months, in weeks, maybe. No? Developing the policies, institutions, cybersecurity professionals, regulatory capacity, governance structures, and public trust necessary to manage the technology can take years. This creates what I would call a capacity gap accompanying the technology gap. And that is where cyber capacity building becomes essential. One of the lessons I learned through my work in international cyber capacity building, the GFC, for example, is that successful capacity building should begin with needs, not solutions. Yeah. So often, organizations arrive with a solution and then look for a problem that fits it. The better model is the opposite. No? Kailangan mo munang intindihin, no? Ano ba ang requirement ng isang bansa na yan? Ano ba yung maturity ng bansa na yan? Ano ba mga institusyon sa bansa na yan? You know, you have to understand the local threat environment. You have to understand their existing capabilities, identify the gaps, and etc. And then connect those needs with the appropriate expertise, resources, donors, implementers, and partners. So this was a central approach, developed within the GFCE. Unfortunately, GFC is already, dissolved. But the community is still there. No? The GFC's model envisioned regional hubs as the front office for engagement, needs identification, coordination, knowledge sharing, and matchmaking, while remaining neutral conveners and knowledge brokers rather than becoming another door or implementing organization. So that principle is relevant far beyond cybersecurity. Development should be demand driven, not technology driven. So the next principle is partnership. No government can independently build all the capabilities necessary for Industry 4.0. Consider cybersecurity alone. Much of the infrastructure that governments depend upon is owned and operated by the private sector. Wala naman kung may-aring gobyerno, right? Much of the software comes from private companies. Cloud infrastructure is largely commercial. Telecom networks involve private operators. Cybersecurity technologies are developed extensively by industry. Research and talent development involve universities. Civil society plays an important role in accountability, rights, inclusion, and public trust, just like Brian has mentioned, right, Mark? So this means that governance architecture for Industry 4.0 must be genuinely multi-stakeholder. Government provides policy direction, regulation, and public accountability. Industry provides innovation, investment, technology, and operational capability. Academia provides research, knowledge, and talent. CSOs help provide inclusion, accountability, and trust. And international partners contribute knowledge, resources, experience, and capacity building. The GFCE strategic framework similarly recognizes public-private partnership as a cross-cutting mechanism for sustainable cyber capacity building, including collaboration on AI and emerging technologies. But partnership must occur before a crisis. If the first time government industry change telephone numbers is during a major cyber attack, we already have a problem. That is why meron tayong point of contacts, diba, in ASEAN, as explained by Mark a while ago. So relationship must be established beforehand. I remember in 2018 when I was the assistant secretary in charge, a minister in charge for cybersecurity of the Philippines. We were the first region to recognize the UN norms in cyberspace. So that's where we started to develop at the working level the ASEAN Cyber Cooperation Strategy, the ASEAN CERT, and in 2024, 2025, the ASEAN CERT was already operational. So information sharing mechanisms must exist beforehand. No? Exercises, for example, cyber exercises must exist, must occur beforehand. Responsibilities must be understood beforehand. That is very important, in cybersecurity and of course in digital transformation. Trust cannot be improvised during an incident. There's a international dimension to all this. Digital transformation may occur within national borders, but digital ecosystems do not respect those borders. Our data may be stored in another jurisdiction, in cloud computing. Your cloud computing headquarter may be headquartered elsewhere. Our software supply chain may involve developers across multiple countries. A cyber criminal, targeting a Filipino company, may be operating thousands of miles away, right? Kilometers away, right? An attack may transit infrastructure in several jurisdictions before it reaches its victims. No. AI models and digital platforms operate globally. So while cybersecurity begins nationally, cyber resilience increasingly requires international cooperation. So this is particularly relevant in our region, ASEAN. No? Our economies are becoming increasingly interconnected. Our digital economies are growing, cross-border digital services are expanding, and therefore, our cyber dependencies are expanding as well. Regional cooperation should not require every country to have identical systems or laws. But we do need greater interoperability, common principles, trusted relationship, information sharing, capacity building, incident response cooperation, and mechanisms for countries with different levels of maturity to strengthen one another. The GFCE emphasizes regional hubs as a central knowledge resource for national and regional CCB needs, with mechanisms for matching those needs to our available resources. That model reflects a broader lesson. Cybersecurity is strongest when capacity is shared rather than isolated. So let me return to the question in today's theme. Who is driving Industry 4.0 and beyond? Is it the government? Is it industry? Or technology companies? AI developers? Yung consumers ba? No? I believe the answer is all of them. But they have different responsibilities. Industry, for example, will continue driving much of the innovation. Markets will influence adoption. Governments will establish rules and public policy. Civil society will challenge us to consider inclusion, rights, and accountability. And citizens will ultimately determine whether these technologies are trusted and accepted. The danger comes when one actor dominates the conversation. If technology alone drives transformation, we risk innovation without accountability. If regulation alone drives transformation, we risk accountability without innovation. If markets alone determines the outcome, then we risk efficiency without inclusion. And if cybersecurity is ignored, we risk building a highly connected society that is also highly vulnerable. So the answer, therefore, is governed innovation that is encouraged, risk that is understood, security that is built in, no? Accountability that is clear, and people who remain at the center. So if I could leave 5 principles, with you before before we begin our panel discussion, I think first is security by design. Do not build your infrastructure first and ask how to secure it afterward. Build security into the architecture. Okay. The second thing is resilience over perfect prevention. Prevent what we can, but prepare for what gets through. Organizations must be capable of continuing essential functions even during serious cyber incidents. Right? Look at PhilHealth when it was attacked. Because we were disrupted for a very long time, right? For how many days, right? Third, human-centered AI. I think AI should augment human capability without eliminating human accountability. Fourth, inclusive digital transformation. Meaning, measure success not simply by how much technology we deploy, but by how many people can meaningfully and safely benefit from it. And fifth, shared responsibility. Kanina sinasabi ko na paulit-ulit, the government cannot do this alone, industry cannot do this alone, no individual can do this alone. Industry 4.0 requires cooperation across institutions, sectors, and disciplines. And of course, borders because of the international cooperation. So I think my time is up. So anyways, I'd like to close by saying that technological progress is going to continue. AI will become more capable. Machines will become more autonomous. Infrastructure will become more interconnected. Data will become more valuable. And the distinction between our physical and digital lives will become increasingly difficult to identify. We cannot stop that transformation, nor should we want to, but we can decide how to govern it. The real test of Industry 4.0 will therefore not be how many AI systems we deploy. It will not be how many processes we automate. It will not be how many devices we connect. And it will not simply be how fast our digital economy grows. The real test will be whether this technological transformation makes our societies more prosperous, inclusive, secure, and resilient. The future should not merely be technologically advanced. It must also be a future that people can trust. So when we ask who is driving,
Sir, I think we lost your audio for a bit. Yes, okay. Sir Cabanlong is currently experiencing some technical difficulties, but for sure you can continue your point later on once the once the connection is back. But we'd like to
all
thank you
right.
for your there you go. There you go. Hello, sir?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes. Please
Oh, okay.
continue your
Sorry.
point. Yeah,
Sorry
no
for that.
problems.
Yeah. Yan ang problem sa Industry 4.0, yung connectivity, right? Anyways, so saan na ba ako? Uh, the real test, no? I think will be whether this transformation makes our society prosperous, inclusive, secure, and resilient. No? Uh, the future should not merely be technologically advanced. No? It must also be a future of, you know, that people can trust. So when we ask who's driving Industry 4.0 and beyond, the answer is that we all have a role, but we need to understand who is responsible for what. Innovation provides momentum, governance provides the direction, cybersecurity provides the resilience, partnerships will provide the scale. No? And ultimately, people, us, must remain at the center. If you spell out security, you know what are the two letters in the middle of security? Di ba UR? Tama ba? SECURITY. UR, in the middle of security, right? So people must remain at the center. Trust. What is the middle letter of trust? Di ba U, right? So security and trust, people is at the center. Because Industry 4.0 should never simply be about building smarter machines. No, it should be about using smarter technologies, to build better, safer, more resilient, and more inclusive societies. So, anyways, thank you very much, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cabanlong, for sharing such practical and actionable points for inclusive Industry 4.0 in the ASEAN. What really stood out for me was the beginning question. What do we actually want technology to do for us? Because really, Industry 4.0 is not only about AI, automation, IoT, or other digital tools. It's also about how these technologies reshape societies, institutions, and also opportunities. So once again, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. So now we move on to our Q&A session. I already saw a few of our participants raising their hands. I know you're all eager to ask your questions, so feel free to drop them in our Q&A box or raise your hand if you would like. But yeah, feel free to drop any of your questions in our Q&A box. You can address them to one speaker or both of our speakers for this afternoon. Yeah. While we're waiting for our participants to drop in their questions, um, once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Kabanlong and Dr. Manantan for the insightful presentations. Just for me personally, one thing that I was really thinking about during both of your presentations was that, like, how can cybersecurity be integrated into digital inclusion efforts without creating additional barriers to technology access? Because I know, I think it was Mr. Cabanlong who mentioned that sometimes, when we do advanced technology, it can create barriers or sometimes a bit of hindrance. And Dr. Manantan also mentioned about our bureaucratic siloing. So, how do we advance inclusive digital efforts without creating additional technological barriers to access? Um, any of any of our speakers can answer the question. Yeah. Maybe Dr. Manantan would like to go first.
So the question, to clarify, the question is, or was, how do we create inclusive digital policies
Yes, sir. Without creating additional barriers to technological access or technology access.
without creating? I think Alan can go ahead.
Sir Alan,
Anyways,
yes.
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 You should not think, that cybersecurity is a barrier to digital inclusion. Actually, when you develop something like a system, like digital government system, cybersecurity should be included into the design, because it protects the user. You know, if someone wants to be to use that system, for example, if the system is not secure, then nobody will use it. If some if this system um, is always down, you know, if the government services is always down, then there's no point of having that system. Just like the field health, for example, when that field health was compromised, and the people, the users, using that system cannot access their data, so nasa hospital sila, and then when they want to access those information while they were in the hospital, then you know hindi nila hindi sila makapag-process ng kanilang request so that they can access the PhilHealth system. So just think about when digital transformation, when cybersecurity is not mainstream in digital transformation, then all this um, barrier, to access the services, the public services, you know, uh, will hinder um, the functionality, the services that it can provide to the people, thus, excluding them from using these public services provided by the government. So I think cybersecurity should not be seen as a barrier. No, that's what I meant in my presentation to digital inclusion, to digital transformation, but as an enabler, for us users to use with trust, no, these uh, public services provided by the government.
Yeah, I think, Gab, to your question, I think it goes back to what I've mentioned about bureaucratic siloing, and I will tackle this question by emphasizing about how do we create inclusive policies, the procedural sort of templates and processes that we need in creating inclusive digital policies. And I'll give you a concrete example that we've done. In 2022 to 2024, I ran a cyber capacity building called Cyber ASEAN. And the way that we've tackled this is actually to create the process as inclusive as possible. So the Cyber ASEAN was ahead of its time in 2022 because it challenged the conventional approach to capacity building and capacity cyber policy research, because instead of adopting Oxford maturity model, all the existing Western templates on cyber capacity building, we created the framework from the ground up. And so we've conducted multi-stakeholder consultations across Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam using the ASEAN Cybersecurity Cooperation Strategy 2021 to 2025 as sort of the foundational framework. And out of that, we convened these consultations, these meetings with different cybersecurity communities across the region. And so when you think about inclusive digital policies, we're not just talking about uh, it's not just about cybersecurity per se, or a very technological deterministic approach. It's actually who are those sitting in the table creating those policies, because normally it's really the same suspects and the same people you see in conferences, the same individuals speaking in mainstream media. But the harder question that we should be asking should be who are the blind spots in these consultations that are not given the opportunity to sort of participate. Like, let's just take, for example, the global discussions on cyber policy. Most of these discussions are happening in Brussels, in Tokyo, in New York. And rarely that uh, individuals from the global south, including the Philippines, get the chance to go to New York and participate in these global discussions. But if you look at the data itself, majority or 80 to 85% of the global population who will be consumers and innovators of technologies will be residing in the global south in the next 10 to 20 years, but they are not given a seat at the table. And so that's how you break the pattern of, or at least, sorry, promote inclusive digital policies, because participation itself, it's not the technology, I would argue. It's more of the access to these discussions to that exacerbate technological barriers that you've mentioned, and thus impacts how governments allocate resources to acquire, procure technologies. It impacts the public awareness campaigns that governments do, whether through AI or cybersecurity, whatever technology you think about, because the voices of the majority are not taken into consideration during the inception of those policies.
Thank you so much for that insightful answer. Truly, it is about interrogating and looking at who can participate or who are the blind spots. So we have a question here in our chat. So let me read it out loud, and either Mr. Cabanlong or Dr. Manantan can answer. So, question: in the seemingly geopolitically divisive world, do you think it is a bane as well to have technological advancements, as it is also being used as weapons for mass destruction? How can we ethically make technological security would not impair civil liberties and the ability to democratically participate in society affairs? How does this impinge on personal data, and where does it draw the line on how to process people's private information for government use? So I think that's a pretty loaded question, but maybe we can go to Mr. Cabanlong first.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, you are
Medyo
audible.
yeah, medyo choppy yung question kanina. Can you
Okay.
can you can you repeat that, or is there
It's
uh
in the chat, sir, but let me repeat it.
in the chat?
Yes.
I just turned off my video kasi medyo mabagal yung aking internet.
Sure, sir, no problem. Let me
Okay.
repeat the question. So, again, in the seemingly geopolitically divisive world, do you think it is a bane as well to have technological advancements as it is also being used as a weapon for mass destruction? How can we ethically make technological security that would not impair civil liberties and the ability to democratically participate in society affairs? And how does this impinge on personal data, and where does it draw the line on how to process people's private information for government use?
Yes, so I believe, with the current state of with the current landscape of cybersecurity in the Philippines, scams, disinformation, and etc. You know, um, Information has been weaponized, by some organizations, even governments, to infringe privacy rights of individuals. But how do we make sure that our information, handled by the government, are not used, for these kinds of uh, disinformation, or operations, is by you know uh, enforcing our RA 10173, the Republic Act, or the Data Privacy Act of the Philippines, as well as enforcing and implementing strictly the RA 10175, or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of the Philippines. So these safeguards are already in these policies, or in this law, and I believe enforcement is a very important, in order to punish, or to make someone responsible, whoever will be doing this kinds of disinformation. So we need to build capacity to our government, law enforcement officials, as regards to detection on how this information are being used against citizens. And this is very, very important. We have all these policies already, um, but we just need to implement and enforce uh, these laws.
Dr. Mark, do you have anything to,
Yeah,
would you like to
I
add? Yeah.
guess I guess the this question really cuts across so many things, but I'll respond with two points. I think the first one is whenever, and let's step back a little bit here. Whenever we talk about sort of the binding constraints, the benefits, the risks, and the opportunities of AI or whatever emerging technology we're talking about, I think we have to first and foremost recognize the genie is already out of the bottle, and that these technologies are already widely dispersed, whether we like it or not, whether they process our data or, lawfully or unlawfully, or they, subject to cyber attack. So the question that we should be asking is, what is the acceptable level of risk that we are going to tolerate as a society, as an organization, and as a country when these technologies, which of course will have, will be hacked, will be leaked, or will be undermined by inadvertently or advertently by malicious actors, be it state or non-state. So that's the first point that we should be asking ourselves. The second point that I'd offer is on this notion of, I think the question was, how can we ethically make technological security would not impinge on civil liberty. So I've answered that with that risk appetite. How does this impinge on personal data, and where does it draw the line on how to process people's private information or government use? And you add to that his first point about geopolitical divisiveness. So there are so many factors at play in this particular question, but what I would like to raise is that, unfortunately, in a geotechnological competitive world, and this is the subject of a recent paper I've wrote, who controls the stack controls the future. And as long as the Philippines, in this, I'm just going to answer your question, Marvin, in the context of the Philippines. As long as the Philippines is a technological taker, adopter, and not actually a technological trailblazer, these are the questions that we are going to keep coming back on. I'm not suggesting that the Philippines can be the United States or China, who have a complete control of the entire AI stack from top to bottom. But what I'm suggesting here is how we can graduate and elevate to the level of countries such as South Korea, Singapore, or even Japan, and even Australia, who have some level of technological autonomy, given that they occupy a considerable amount, or at least a level, in the AI stack, be it semiconductor or critical minerals or advanced computing, given their native or domestic technological ecosystem. So I think that's the question that countries with less technological capabilities will always be exposed to external actors who hold the keys to these technologies.
Thank you so much for that. So, in the interest of time, we're going to answer one last question. But to our participants, feel free to send over your questions and we can compile them and send them to our speakers for this afternoon. So, the question is, from your industry perspective, how do you assess the Philippine government's current direction on AI legislation? Do you foresee a common AI governance framework extending beyond ASEAN and building on existing UN initiatives? And what role should industry play in shaping it? Sir
That's
Alan?
a yes,
Yes.
that's a very good question. We are now developing the cyber AI bill, no, in Congress. There are so many sponsors to that, and I think there's already a consolidated version of that bill for the AI bill. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach, I believe. Its focus is on regulating, the effects of AI to us, the citizens, and in terms of AI-enabled crimes, as well as regulating, building more capacity to develop the SMEs, and as well as hindi ko memorize lahat but these are the things that we did when we were invited to be part of the AI technical team with UP-CIFAL to in the Congress. So as much as possible, the sponsors would like to use AI as a platform for our economic driver to be at least to be at par with other countries like Singapore, Southeast Asia. But we know it's hard, no. But I think we are doing our best to put that in that legislation. Um, uh, at least we need to build capacity for our SMEs to support um, small medium enterprises in assisting them with artificial intelligence. We are not yet on the level of we we'll be developing AI uh, products or solutions, but we are considering those in in other meetings as well. No? Medyo ang focus kasi natin is more on the regulatory dun sa effects of AI. But what we would like to suggest to recommend to Congress is how do we, as a Filipino, we would like to develop AI tools. No, actually, UP College of Engineering, uh, headed by Professor Pros, is developing an AI machine already. No, AI solutions for fishing or aquatic. No? And I think yun dapat ang gawin ng legislation to support those innovation in AI. So yes, so I think we can do more on that legislation, on that bill, to refine it more. Kasi hindi pa tapos eh. So the bill should at least be more adaptive to technological changes, as well as to other things that we need uh, to develop AI capacity in the Philippines.
Um, Yeah, Gab, I think very quickly, I'm the UNESCO expert for the Philippines. So we've published the readiness assessment methodology results last year with the OST as the lead organization for our NAIS strategy. I would argue that it's actually, I mean, nationally, we have the NAIS strategy, and Alan already mentioned some of the pending legislations in Congress. We have the ASEAN AI guidelines, of course, which the Philippines is also part. The Philippines also endorsed the UNESCO recommendations on the ethics of AI. What I would argue, and this is also came out from the UNESCO report that I wrote, is that again, bureaucratic siloing is very evident in the Philippines. And as I've again emphasized in my presentation, a regulation doesn't really solve so much of the. I mean, it's only step one of the entire other aspects of AI governance. And I go back to my presentation for this webinar. What is our accountability metrics for these policies once they are enacted or passed? And given that technology evolves very, very rapidly, how can we create agile policies that adapt to such a fast changing world? And so, in countries, for example, such as Singapore, Malaysia, and the rest of the other countries across the region, they've already established a national AI office that really consolidates all those efforts to ensure that AI policy, be it from the industry, academia, or government, is followed through and given enough resources. So I would argue that until the Philippines really comes up with a consolidated approach to its AI policy making, through an interagency cooperation or something similar to what Singapore or Malaysia is doing, these frameworks or governance again are as good as paper sitting in the shelves of our politicians.
And thank you so much for your answer. So instead, we'll just be answering just the last two questions here. So it's also okay to answer briefly. So the next question from um, Director Ihuma from Sifal, Nigeria. We'd also like to thank you for being here with us this afternoon. So the question is, what are the risks and unintended consequences when key drivers of Industry 4.0 operate in separate silos, with private sector innovation advancing faster than government's ability to understand, regulate, and keep pace with these developments? Again, what are the risks and unintended consequences when the drivers of Industry 4.0 operate in separate silos, with the private sector innovation advancing faster than the government's ability to understand, regulate, and keep pace with these developments? Sir Alan, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Gab. Yeah, actually, uh, we cannot achieve anything if we move, in silos. As I've mentioned, we have to work together because each of us has different mandates. Government regulates, private sector, in industry, creates, this platform that government and everyone can use. So academia will, do the research and each other. So I think the multi-stakeholderism of Industry 4.0 should be enforced, and it's a must. No, although in the Philippines it's not yet there, but it's slowly going there with the DICT e-government. With the e-government act of the Philippines, it's moving towards there. So it's just a matter of implementing it. The policy is clear, and the law is clear that it should be multi-stakeholder. But the implementation and enforcing the law should be clear enough, by putting the right people at the right place, in the government to regulate, by having these mechanisms to create a public-private partnerships with a multi-stakeholder approach involving academia and the civil society groups. So yeah, it's a must. We cannot move in silos, otherwise we will be left behind again. Thank you.
Yeah, Gab, I think to add to this, and I'll also take some of the questions on Paxilica, especially Katrina. Hi, Katrina, as well. And I think this is a very interesting question about if we go back, what are the risks and unintended consequences of the key drivers of Industry 4.0? 4.0. I would argue that the unintended consequence is that our ambition, our drive for innovation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we adhere to the principle of inevitability that the only way to go in our society today is adopt AI, get AI, and this is very apparent with the ongoing debate in Pax Silica in the Philippines, where the sort of principle of inevitability of there's no way but up but to absorb all data center
investments or get AI investments. While there is an argument to be made that I've already mentioned in my presentation on the economic benefits of artificial intelligence. We should be mindful as of the debate about environmental consequences, and really the actual benefits of, for example, building more data centers in the Philippines. And so I think I would caution all of us here when we think about technological policy about the principle of inevitability, and that sometimes being the first mover is not always the most advantageous position. If you look at how Singapore and Malaysia have been really dialing back on their data center growth, given the unintended consequences and risks of these data centers in their communities, in their water resources, and also with their electricity resources. And so again, those are the unintended consequences that perhaps the debate on Pax Silica is revealing currently in the Philippines. And it doesn't take much effort to look at our neighbors when what the incessant drive and the inevitability of AI has done to them in terms of their environmental as well as socioeconomic consequences.
Yun. Thank you so much, Dr. Manantan. Sir Alan, would you like to add on what on this last question? Specifically, where do we position ourselves in the U.S.-China chip race vis-a-vis the controversy surrounding Pax Silica?
Oh, it's a very political question. Well, yeah, well, as Marcus mentioned, it's right now. My stand is we don't hinder innovation, no? With legal or anything that 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 would make us, not innovative at some point. Yes, Pax Silica is there, data centers there. We are the first country in Southeast Asia that has been invited by the US to join this Pax Silica. Actually, they're already building there in Clark. Um, so as I mentioned, environmental guardrails should be implemented, should be improved. Um, we have, I believe, we have competent environmental natural resources. I believe. I'm not saying, I'm not saying they are, but I believe they should really implement these kinds of guardrails that would not hinder innovation. Bantayan nila if ever the water resources is not feasible to build data centers here in this site, then they should have been, they should say no. Otherwise, they should relocate the site. But I'm not saying that I'm not anti Paxilica. I'm not pro Paxilica. But what I'm trying to say is dapat balance tayo. We should see the benefit of this to our people. No, um, if this will give us jobs, then why not? If this job will also destroy our environment, then thank you na lang, right? So I mean, that's why we have DNR. We have government regulators that can help us study this further. So hindi kailangan ora-orada na andyan na yan, no? We have to make a study, about how to make this favorable to the Filipino people. Hindi lang para sa favorable to sa bulsa ng mga sa gobyerno. Thank you.
And truly, it has been an insightful and engaging conversation this afternoon. But of course, the discussion never ends there. We have a lot to think about, a lot to contemplate, and of course, a lot of cooperation with our fellows to do so that no one is left behind. Once again, we'd like to thank our speakers for this afternoon, Dr. Mark Brian Manantan and Mr. Alan Cabanlong. So, thank you very much. So before we wrap up our webinar for this afternoon, I'd like to share just 5 key takeaways from the whole discussion. So One is that Industry 4.0 is not just about technology, it's about how technology improves people's lives and supports inclusive and sustainable development. Two, innovation needs governance. New technologies must be matched by accountability, inclusion, and clear rules. Three, cybersecurity should enable innovation. It should be part of the systems from the start, not something added only after problems happen. Fourth is accountability is both corrective and preventive. We need to identify wrongdoing, but we also need stronger institutions, skills, and systems to prevent harm. And last but not the least, ASEAN needs stronger cooperation, capacity building, information sharing, legal clarity, and regional partnerships are key to making Industry 4.0 more secure, inclusive, and resilient. And with that, we wrap up today's webinar. And we'd like to thank again our speakers, our organizers, and of course, to our engaged audience. We hope you leave today's session inspired and ready to take action for our in your own communities. And of course, if you would like to if you would like to keep updated on CIFAL's on UP-CIFAL Philippines' other activities, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course on LinkedIn. We are active and we are always sharing new activities and trainings that you can partake in. Also, please scan the feedback form. We would like to provide more activities for you, and we'd like to hear your feedback on our event this afternoon. You can also send an email for a request for a certificate. Um, yeah. Once again, we'd like to thank everyone. Please feel free to scan the feedback form and tune in next time for more events from UP Safal Philippines.